My father's hands were shaking. That's what I remember first, not the sound of him pulling me from sleep, not the cold of the basement floor against my bare feet, not even the words he was saying. His hands. My father had hands that could split firewood for 6 hours straight without gloves. Hands that rebuilt a transmission on a flat driveway in January. I had never seen them shake. Get up, Marcus, right now. Don't turn on the light. I was 16. Old enough to know something was wrong, young enough to obey without asking. The clock on my nightstand read 2:07 a.m. My father was already dressed, boots, jacket, the canvas pants he wore for hunting. But he wasn't moving like a man going hunting. He was moving like prey. Dad. Shoes, jacket, nothing else. Move. My younger brother Eli was already in the hallway, 12 years old and ghost pale in the dark. He had his shoes on the wrong feet. My father didn't correct him. That scared me more than anything. We went down the basement stairs single file. My father had his hand on the back of my neck, not guiding me, gripping me like I might bolt. The basement was the same cluttered mess it always was. Mom's old exercise bike, Christmas boxes, the deep freezer that hummed too loud. But my father walked past all of it to the back wall, the one with the metal shelving unit bolted to the cinder blocks. He pulled the whole unit forward. It swung on a hinge I'd never noticed. Behind it was a door, steel, gray, a combination lock the size of my fist. Dad, what is this? He didn't answer. His fingers worked the dial 3 turns, 2 turns, 1, and the mechanism released with a sound like a rifle bolt. He pulled the door open, and fluorescent light spilled out. Blue-white and clinical, illuminating a set of concrete stairs descending at least 12 feet. Go, he said. Both of you. Now. Eli grabbed my arm. Marcus? I know. I took his hand. We went down. The shelter was real. That's the thing I kept thinking as my feet hit the bottom. It was real. My mother had divorced my father 3 years earlier, and among her reasons, the ones she'd said to his face at the kitchen table, was that he'd become someone she didn't recognize. Someone consumed. I'd chosen to live with him because I was old enough to, and because I thought she was being unfair. But I'd never seen this. The room was maybe 30 feet long, 15 wide. Bunk beds along one wall, military surplus. Shelves of canned food stacked floor to ceiling. A chemical toilet behind a curtain. Water jugs, 50-gallon drums, stacked like a barricade. A radio set up on a metal desk with wires running up through the ceiling. The air was clean but cold, circulated by a fan I could hear but not see. My father came down last. He sealed the door behind him, not just closed it, sealed it. 3 bolts, each one requiring a separate twist. Then he stood with his back against it, and for the first time, I saw his face fully in the light. He'd been crying. My father hadn't cried at his own mother's funeral. Hadn't cried when my mother left. I'd spent years believing he wasn't capable of it. Dad, my voice cracked. What's happening? He slid down the door until he was sitting on the concrete, knees up, those shaking hands pressed over his face. Eli moved toward him, but I held my brother back. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. The sense that whatever was breaking my father open was something I needed to understand before I touched it. There's an outbreak, he said through his hands. Started 2 days ago, West Coast. They've been lying about it, saying it's under control. He dropped his hands. His eyes were red-rimmed, raw. It's not under control, Marcus. It's here. It's in Caldwell. I saw it. I saw what they do. Saw what? What did you see? He looked at me like I was already older than 16, like he needed me to be. I watched a woman on Route 9 eat a man alive under a streetlight. Cops weren't coming. Nobody was coming. It took her 4 minutes, and he stopped screaming after 2. Eli made a sound. Small, airless. My father stood up, wiped his face with both hands, and became someone else. The shaking stopped. His voice flattened, his shoulders squared. "We're going to be down here for a while," he said. "I need you both to listen to me. I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that?" I said yes. Eli said yes. And for the first hours, I believed my father was the man who would save us. I believed it completely. That was my first mistake. The shelter had been built over years. I worked that out by the layers. The oldest supplies on the bottom shelves had expiration dates from when I was 11. He'd been building this since before the divorce. Maybe that was part of what my mother had sensed. Not paranoia, exactly. Certainty. The quiet, corrosive certainty that something was coming and that preparing for it justified anything. He ran us through the space like a drill sergeant. Water system. Gravity fed from the drums, filtered through a ceramic unit. Power. A battery bank charged by a small generator vented through the same shaft as the air system. Food. 900 days of calories for 2 adults, he said, then paused and recalculated. For 3 of us, roughly 16 months. "You planned this for 2 people, I said. He didn't flinch. "I planned this for you and me." Eli looked at the floor. My brother had lived with our mother since the split. He'd been visiting for the weekend, just the weekend. A coincidence of timing that saved his life. "Eli wasn't supposed to be here," I said. Not a question. "No." My father's voice carried no apology. "But he is. And we adjust." That's how he talked. Adjust, adapt, optimize. Like survival was engineering and people were variables. I'd admired it once. I was beginning to hear it differently now. He showed us the radio next. Shortwave, battery-powered backup, hand-crank emergency unit alongside it. He turned the dial through frequencies, and we listened together, static, 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 then a voice. Male, official sounding. A recorded loop. "Shelter in place. Do not travel. Military checkpoints are active on all major routes. Do not approach individuals displaying signs of infection. Symptoms include unresponsive pupils, loss of verbal capacity, aggression without provocation, insensitivity to pain." The message repeated. My father turned it off. "That's been running since midnight," he said. "Same loop. No live broadcasts, no updates." "What does that mean?" "Means nobody's sitting at that microphone anymore." He assigned bunks. Top for me, bottom for Eli, and the cot by the radio for himself. He set a schedule. Sleep in shifts. Check the radio every 2 hours. Ration water to 1 liter per person per day until we confirm the filtration system's throughput. Everything structured, everything controlled. And for the first 6 hours, it worked. We slept, or tried to. Eli curled against the wall with his jacket bunched under his head, and his breathing eventually slowed. I lay in the dark on the top bunk and listened to my father at the radio desk, turning the dial with agonizing slowness, searching for any voice that wasn't a recording. At 8 a.m. by his watch, he found one. A man's voice, broken by distance and interference. "Boise is gone. Don't go to Boise. Military pulled out. The shelters are God. The shelters are the worst places. They put people together, and when one turns..." Then nothing. Static. My father wrote it on a yellow legal pad. "Boise fallen. Shelters compromised. Military withdrawal confirmed." "Dad." I sat up on the bunk. "Mom's in Boise." He didn't turn around. Dad, I know where your mother is, Marcus. We can't. We can't. He turned then. His face was locked, set like concrete. There's nothing between here and Boise but 90 miles of open road and whatever's on it. I won't risk you. I won't risk your brother. She's our mother. And she's 100 miles from here in a city that just fell. His voice didn't rise. That was worse. I'm sorry. I am. But she is beyond our reach. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to climb those stairs and open those 3 bolts and run into whatever was outside because at least it would be motion. At least it would be trying. But Eli was watching me from the bottom bunk with eyes that held nothing but trust in me. Trust that I would know what to do. Trust that I was old enough to understand things he couldn't yet. So I swallowed it. All of it. I climbed back into the bunk and turned toward the wall and felt something harden inside my chest that wouldn't soften for a very long time. My father went back to the radio. And the first crack appeared not between us and the dead world above, but between my father and me. A fracture line that would widen with every decision he made without me, every question he deflected, every time he looked at me and chose to see a child when I was already carrying weight he hadn't asked if I could bear. On the second day, my father started talking to himself. Not loudly, not dramatically, just murmuring. At the radio desk, while he turned the dial, little fragments, responses to conversations that weren't happening. I caught pieces. Should have gone Tuesday. And told you it was real. And once, clearly, my mother's name, just her name, Ellen, said to the static like a prayer. I told myself it was stress, normal stress response. 2 days underground, no sunlight, the world ending above you, anyone would talk to themselves. I was 16, and I needed my father to be solid, so I found reasons for everything. The murmuring was stress. The way he'd forget he'd already told us something and repeat it word for word was fatigue. The way his eyes would unfocus for 10, 20 seconds at a time while he stared at the concrete wall that was just thinking, planning, being the kind of man who thinks ahead. Eli noticed too. He didn't say anything, but he started sleeping closer to my bunk. Not in it on the floor beside it, wrapped in a sleeping bag he'd pulled from the supply shelf. Like proximity to me was safety. Like he was already shifting his center of gravity. On day 3, the radio picked up a local signal. Close, maybe within our county. A woman's voice, ragged. If anyone can hear this, we're in the elementary school on Pine Street. There are 40 of us. We have water for 2 more days. The National Guard never came. They're in the parking lot, dozens of them. They don't leave. If you have weapons, if you have vehicles, please. There are children here. My father listened to the whole transmission, wrote nothing on the legal pad, turned the dial away. Dad, that's Pine Street. That's 3 miles from here. I know where Pine Street is. We could what, Marcus? He turned in the chair. Walk 3 miles through an active zone? Open this shelter to 40 people when it holds 3 for 16 months? What exactly do you imagine we could do? Something. Anything. There are kids. There are kids right here. He pointed at Eli. There are kids in this room that I'm keeping alive. That is my responsibility. Not Pine Street. Not 40 strangers. You and your brother. That's it. He was right. Tactically, logistically, by every metric of survivable math, he was right. And I hated him for it, with a clarity that felt clean and permanent. I said nothing. But that night, when he fell asleep at the radio desk with his head on his arms, I turned the dial back to the school's frequency and listened. The woman was still broadcasting. Calmer now. Reading names. 43 people, she said, including 11 children under 10. She read each name slowly, clearly, like she was writing them into the air so they'd exist somewhere outside those walls. I memorized 3 before the signal cut to static. Jamie Orozco, age 7. Destiny Washington, age 4. Paul Maddox, age 9. I don't know what happened to them. I never found out. But I carry those names like stones in my pocket, and I will carry them until I die. On day 4, my father forgot Eli's name. Not for long, maybe 3 seconds. He was portioning out the morning ration: canned peaches, crackers, water. And he looked at my brother, and his mouth opened, and nothing came out. Then, "Here, buddy, eat slow." Buddy, not Eli. I watched my brother's face and saw that he noticed. Saw that he chose not to react. 12 years old and already performing the mercy of pretending not to see what was breaking. That night, I took inventory of the medical supplies while my father slept, flashlight between my teeth, moving quietly between the shelves. I found what I was afraid of finding. 3 prescription bottles in a plastic bag, tucked behind the first aid kit. Olanzapine, lithium, sertraline, all in my father's name, all full, all with fill dates from 2 months ago. He'd stopped taking them, or never started this refill. I didn't know which was worse. I put them back exactly as I found them. Sat on the cold floor in the dark with my knees against my chest, and I felt the architecture of our survival shift beneath me. Not dramatically, not all at once, but with the slow certainty of a house settling on bad foundation. My father was not well. My father was the only system between us and death. And those 2 facts were about to become the same problem. By day 6, the pattern was undeniable. My father's cycles ran roughly 12 hours. In the mornings, he was sharp, organized, methodical, almost manic in his productivity. He'd run maintenance checks on the air system, catalog inventory with precise handwriting, quiz me on water purification procedures like it was a homeschool exam. These were the hours where I could almost believe we were fine, where the shelter felt like a plan and not a coffin. But by evening, something shifted. His words would slow, his sentences would trail off mid-thought. He'd start tasks and abandon them. Leave a can of food half opened on the desk, walk to the radio and stand before it without turning it on, sit on his cot and stare at the sealed door like he expected something to knock. And the murmuring got worse. Longer conversations with people who weren't there. I recognized the cadence of arguments, his voice rising and falling in rhythms that mimicked dialogue. Once I heard him say, "I told you to take the boys," in a tone so sharp that Eli flinched awake. I started structuring our days around his good hours. Morning. Engage him, let him teach, let him plan. Keep him in the role he needed to feel solid. Afternoon. Get Eli doing something quiet. I'd found a deck of cards in the supply shelves, and we played endless rounds of rummy, keeping our voices low and even, a buffer of normalcy around whatever was happening at the radio desk. It worked for a while. Then day 8 broke the system. My father woke before either of us, before the alarm he'd set on his wristwatch. I came awake to the sound of bolts, metal on metal. He was at the door. The first bolt was already thrown open. "Dad?" I dropped from the bunk, bare feet on cold concrete. "Dad, what are you doing?" "She's up there." His voice was conversational, calm, like he was telling me the weather. "Your mother. She made it. I can hear her." "Dad, stop. Mom's not..." He had the second bolt open. I crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed his arm. He looked at me through me with eyes that didn't register my face as familiar. "Let go, Marcus. You need to step back from the door." She walked from Boise. She found us. I can hear her walking around up there. He smiled. A real smile. Warm and full of relief. "She's looking for the entrance. I need to show her." Eli was sitting up in his sleeping bag, frozen, watching. I could feel his fear from across the room like heat from a fire. "Dad, listen to my voice." I kept my grip on his arm. He was stronger than me, had always been stronger, but he wasn't pulling. Just standing there with that terrible smile. "It's nighttime. Nobody's up there. The door stays closed. That's your rule. You told us that." Something flickered in his eyes. A moment of, I don't know, recognition, doubt. His hand was on the 3rd bolt. He didn't turn it. "Your rule, Dad. The door stays sealed until we hear official all clear on the radio. Remember? You made us repeat it." His smile faded. Not all at once. It drained slowly, like water from a tub. His hand dropped from the bolt. He looked at the door, then at me, then at his own hands. And I watched confusion replace certainty. He didn't know why he was standing there. I could see it. The gap in his own narrative, the missing minutes he couldn't account for. "I was checking the seals," he said. His voice had changed. Smaller, unsure, making sure the seals were holding. "Okay, let me close these back up." He stepped aside. I reset both bolts. My hands were shaking now, his disease, inherited in the moment. I threw the 2nd, then the 1st, and pressed my palms against the cold steel until my heartbeat slowed. When I turned around, my father was sitting on his cot with his head in his hands. Eli hadn't moved. I went to my brother and knelt beside him. "It's okay," I whispered. "No, it isn't," Eli said. He was right. It wasn't. And I couldn't pretend anymore. That night, after my father fell asleep deep sleep, the kind that follows an episode, his body shutting down to recover from whatever storm his brain had generated, I sat with Eli at the radio desk and told him the truth. Dad's sick, not infected, not like them. But his brain doesn't work the way it should. There's medicine in the supply kit that he's not taking. Can we make him take it? I don't know. What happens if he opens the door? I looked at my 12-year-old brother in the blue-white fluorescent light and saw that he already knew the answer. That he was asking me to say it because someone had to. Then I'll close it. Whatever happens, Eli, I'll close it. He nodded. And something passed between us, not spoken, not named, a transfer of trust so complete that I felt it like a physical weight settling onto my shoulders. From that moment, in the ways that mattered, I was the one responsible. Not because I chose it, because my father couldn't be. I put the lithium in his food on day 9. I'm not proud of it. I crushed 2 tablets with the back of a spoon and stirred them into canned soup cream of mushroom, thick enough to mask the grit. Watched him eat it. Felt nothing but cold necessity. The medication takes weeks to reach therapeutic levels. I knew that from a health class presentation I'd done in 9th grade. Manic depression, bipolar disorder, the pharmacology of mood stabilizers. But I also knew that some baseline was better than none. That even subtherapeutic levels might dull whatever edge he was sliding toward. For 2 days, nothing changed. He still murmured, still had his evening descents, still looked at the door with that listening posture that made my stomach drop. But he didn't touch the bolts again. Maybe the medication, maybe coincidence. I took it either way. Day 11 brought a new problem. The radio picked up a cluster of transmissions, multiple voices, overlapping, frantic, close, getting closer. I was at the desk when they came through, my father asleep on his cot in a late afternoon crash. North on Highway 5, at least 200 moving in a column. Not random, they're following the highway, following the cars. If you're in the path, you need to move now. They don't stop. They don't. Then a sound through the signal. Not electronic, not radio interference. A sound that came through the concrete, through 12 feet of earth and the sealed steel door. A moan. Not singular plural, layered. The sound of many throats producing the same low frequency simultaneously, like a chord played on broken instruments. I'd never heard them before, not in person, only my father's description and the radio broadcasts. But my body knew the sound before my mind did. Every muscle locked, my vision sharpened. Something old and pre-verbal in my brain, stem said don't move, don't breathe, don't exist. Eli heard it too. He was at the card table, mid-deal, and his hand stopped with a 7 of clubs suspended between his fingers. We looked at each other. The sound grew, not louder, exactly, denser. More voices joining the chord. They were passing over us, over the house, through the neighborhood, moving north along whatever migration path had brought them here. It lasted 11 minutes. I counted. Eli counted too. I saw his lips moving. 11 minutes of sound, like the earth groaning in its sleep. Then it faded. North, away. My father slept through it. I don't know if that terrified me more or less than if he'd been awake. A man whose every instinct was survival, whose entire identity was preparedness, sleeping through a horde passing directly overhead. Whatever his mind was doing to him, it had consumed even that. The animal awareness that should have jolted him upright was gone. That evening, during his lucid window, I made a decision. Dad, I need you to teach me the systems. He looked up from the legal pad he'd been writing, though what he wrote during the evening hours was often illegible or circular. What systems? All of them. The generator, the air filtration, the water, the radio frequencies, the bolts, everything. You don't need... I do. I held his gaze, didn't blink, channeled every hour of his own intensity back at him. If something happens to you, if you get sick, if there's an emergency and you're asleep, I need to know everything. He studied me. In his good hours, he was still perceptive, still capable of seeing through surfaces. I watched him register what I was really saying, watched the flicker of something shame, maybe, or recognition cross behind his eyes. Okay, he said quietly. Tomorrow morning, we'll start. And we did. For 3 days, in his lucid morning windows, my father taught me his shelter like a dying king, showing his heir the kingdom's secret passages. Generator maintenance, fuel mix, spark plug gap, exhaust vent clearance, water system, filter replacement schedule, drum rotation to prevent stagnation, the hand pump backup. Radio, frequency ranges for military, civilian, emergency, which bands to monitor, which to avoid. Air system, the solar-charged fan, the charcoal filters, the CO2 indicator strips. I wrote everything down, filled the legal pad with notes in handwriting steadier than his had been in days. And each morning, as he taught me, I saw him watching my competence grow with an expression I couldn't quite name. Pride, yes, but also something else, something closer to grief. He was watching himself become unnecessary. And some part of him, the part that was still my father, knew exactly what that meant. Day 15. The radio changed everything. I was on the morning monitoring shift, my shift now, not his turning the dial through the usual frequencies. Static, static, the repeated government loop that hadn't updated in 2 weeks. Static. Then a voice I recognized. Not personally, but categorically. Young, female, trying to sound calm and failing. "This is Caldwell High School. We're on the 2nd floor. There are 9 of us. Students and 1 teacher. Mr. Brennan is hurt bad and we don't have medicine. They're on the 1st floor. They got in through the gym, if anyone, please. We've been here for 6 days. We're almost out of water. There are 9 of us. We're on the 2nd floor. Please." She said please like it cost her something each time. Like she knew it was useless but couldn't stop. Caldwell High School. My school. I sat forward in the chair, heart hammering. The voice I placed it. Younger than me by a year. Sophomore. I didn't know her name, but I knew the voice. Assembly, maybe. Or the hallway between 2nd and 3rd period. "Marcus?" Eli was watching from his bunk. I turned the dial away, sat back, breathed. "It's nothing. Old signal." But it wasn't nothing. And within an hour, I'd memorized her broadcast schedule every 30 minutes on the half hour, same message, same frequency. 9 people. My school. Less than a mile from where I sat in buried safety. I didn't tell my father. This was new. This was the first secret I kept, not from ignorance, not from cowardice, but from deliberate calculation. I knew what he would say. I knew his math. 9 people would collapse our timeline from 16 months to less than 3. Open the surface, traverse a mile of unknown territory, bring back strangers when the man in charge of our shelter could barely maintain his own coherence. The variables didn't compute. He'd say no. He'd be right to say no. And I'd have to live with that rightness like a stone in my throat. So I didn't tell him. I monitored, listened, counted her broadcasts. 6 days she'd been there already. "Water for 2 more, she said. That gave me a window, a decision horizon. On day 16, I did something I'd never done before. During my father's afternoon decline, when he was deep in his cot staring at the ceiling with moving lips, I went to the supply shelves and took inventory with different eyes. Not surviving eyes, tactical eyes. What could be carried? What could sustain 9 people for how long? What would I need to move a mile through territory I'd never scouted? I found, among the supplies, a hand-drawn map of our neighborhood. My father had made it detailed, accurate, marking buildings, roads, sightlines. He'd marked certain houses with X's. Houses he'd known were empty when he sealed us in. Potential scavenging sites, potential routes. He'd planned for this possibility. Maybe not this exact scenario, but for the eventuality of needing to move on the surface. The map proved it. Whatever his mind was now, his earlier self had been thorough enough to account for emergence. That night, I lay awake and did my own math. Not his math, mine. 9 people at the school. 16 days without rescue. Water failing. 1st floor breached. 2nd floor holding, but for how long? If the horde I'd heard on day 11 was any indication, the infected moved in patterns. Cycles. Which meant there were windows. Times when the streets between here and the school might be passable. I was 16 years old, and I was planning a rescue mission without telling my father. And the worst part, the part that kept me awake until 4 a.m. with my fists clenched against my legs, was that I wasn't sure if I was doing it because it was right, or because I needed to prove that I wasn't him. That my math included more than the people in my own bunker. That survival meant something larger than breath and heartbeat and the next can of soup. Maybe those are the same thing. I still don't know. Day 17. I told Eli, not my father, "Eli, I need you to understand why." My brother was 12, but 12 in a way that this world had accelerated into something harder. He listened without interrupting, processed without performing panic. And most importantly, he understood that what I was proposing required someone to stay, someone to watch our father, someone to close the door behind me if I didn't come back. "You can't go alone," he said. First thing, not a protest, an assessment. "I don't have a choice. Take the knife, the big one, Eli, and the map, and water. And you come back before dark, or I seal the door and I don't open it again. Promise me." 12 years old, making me promise to abandon him to sealed isolation with a mentally ill father if things went wrong. Making that calculation without crying, without shaking, without any of the softness a 12-year-old should be entitled to. "I promise." "When?" "Tomorrow, early. Dad's sharpest in the morning, which means he'll notice I'm gone. But I need the daylight. Tell him I went to check the air vents on the surface. He's been worried about them. He'll believe it for a few hours." Eli nodded. Then, "What if you bring them back and Dad won't open the door?" I'd thought about this. I know the combination. From the outside. "No, you'll open it. When I knock 4 times, pause, twice more. That's our signal. Nobody else knows it." He repeated it. 4-2, 4-2, nodded again. And then, the only concession to his age he allowed himself, he hugged me. Brief, fierce, his arms thin and hard around my ribs. "Be fast," he whispered. Day 18, 5:47 a.m. My father was in his sharp window. I could hear him at the radio desk, turning the dial with precision. I dressed quietly. Shoes, jacket, the hunting knife in a belt sheath. 2 water bottles. The map folded in my back pocket. A flashlight, though I planned to be back before I needed it. I climbed to the top of the stairs, listened at the door. Nothing. No sound from above. No moan, no footsteps, no ambient noise at all, which was almost worse. The absence of bird song, the absence of traffic. A silence so complete, it felt manufactured. 3 bolts. I turned them slowly, one at a time, each releasing with a soft click that sounded like gunfire in the stairwell. The door swung inward. The basement beyond was dark, but thin light leaked from the ground floor windows. Dawn. Gray and diluted, like the sun wasn't sure it wanted to rise. I stepped into my own house for the first time in 18 days. The smell hit first. Not rot exactly, more like absence. Dust and stale air and the flat chemical scent of things left too long without human presence. The basement looked the same. The shelving unit hung open on its hinge. Upstairs, everything was where we'd left it, coats on hooks, shoes by the door, a glass of water on the kitchen counter grown cloudy with time. But through the windows, the street. Our neighborhood was quiet. Cars and driveways, untouched. Lawns overgrown by 3 weeks of neglect. A bicycle on its side, 2 houses down. Wheels still turning faintly in the breeze, or no, that was my imagination. Nothing moved, nothing at all. I went out the back door, into the yard. The air was cold and wet and tasted like freedom and like danger in equal measure. I kept to the fence line, moved to the alley that ran behind our block. My father's map was accurate. The alley connected to Birch Street, which ran parallel to Main, which would take me within 2 blocks of the school. 3 houses into the alley, I saw my first body. A man, face down in the gravel beside an overturned garbage can. Not moving, not infected, just dead. The back of his skull was wrong, concave where it should have been convex. Someone had put him down. Days ago, by the look of it. Flies circled in a lazy orbit. I stepped over him and kept moving. And that's what I became in those first minutes on the surface. A person who steps over bodies. A person who notes and files and continues. I didn't choose it. It chose me. The alternative was paralysis. And paralysis was death. 2 blocks, then 3. The school appeared through the trees at the end of Pine Street, a long brick building, 2 stories, the parking lot empty except for a bus at an angle across 2 handicap spots. The first floor windows were broken, every one, glass on the pavement like scattered teeth. And beyond those windows, movement. Slow, aimless, shapes passing behind the openings without purpose or pattern. They were still in there, on the first floor, between me and the stairs to the second. I circled the building, kept to the tree line at the edge of the athletic field, crouching low, moving in the damp grass that soaked through my jeans from the knees down. The back of the school, cafeteria loading dock, maintenance entrance, a fire escape on the east side running from ground level to the second floor roof access. The fire escape, metal rusted, bolted to the brick. The bottom section was a drop ladder, retracted up designed to lower from above. 8 feet of gap between the ground and the lowest rung. But beside the loading dock, a dumpster, on wheels. If I could push it beneath the ladder without making noise. I studied the ground floor windows from this angle. The infected inside moved in their patterned slow circuits of the hallway, pausing at intersections, resuming. I counted 7 visible. There could be more in classrooms. The windows were broken, but the shapes stayed inside, contained by walls and habit. They didn't seem to watch the exterior, didn't seem to react to visual stimuli at this distance. But sound, every radio report had confirmed it, sound was their primary vector. I waited 20 minutes, counted their circuits, found the rhythm. Then, in the gap between passes, I moved. The dumpster rolled with a low grinding sound that nearly stopped my heart. I locked my jaw and pushed slow, controlled across 30 feet of asphalt to the base of the fire escape. The noise was constant, metallic, unbearable. I kept my eyes on the windows. Nothing reacted. Nothing turned. I reached the wall, climbed the dumpster's lid, reached for the lowest rung. My fingers closed around rust-rough metal, and I pulled myself up, arms burning, shoes scraping the brick until I could get a foot on the rung and climb properly. Second floor. The fire escape ended at a door. Metal, windowless, a crash bar on the inside. I tried the handle from outside. Locked, of course. I knocked. Soft, controlled. 4 times. Nothing. I knocked again. Added my voice barely above a whisper. I heard you on the radio. I'm from outside. I have supplies. A sound behind the door. Footsteps. Then silence. Someone listening. Deciding. How many of you? A girl's voice. The voice from the radio. Just me. You're a kid. She'd heard it in my voice. I'm 16. I have a shelter. Underground. 18 days of survival. I came to get you out. A long pause. Then the crash bar released with a sound like a bone breaking, and the door swung open, and I saw her, small, dark-haired, wearing a school volleyball jersey that was too big for her, and holding a fire extinguisher like a weapon. Behind her, a hallway, classroom doors, faces peering out of one. I'm Adrienne, she said. If you're lying, I'll kill you myself. I'm not lying. Then get inside before they hear us. I stepped through. She sealed the door behind me, not with a lock, but with a desk wedged under the crash bar and 2 more stacked against the frame. Their barricade. Furniture in desperation. The 9 of them were in a science classroom at the center of the hall. Adrian, a sophomore boy named Kwame, tall and thin with a bruise covering half his face. A junior named Sophie, who wouldn't make eye contact. Twin freshman girls Dana and Lila, who moved in silent synchronization. A kid named Oscar, who couldn't have been older than 14. 2 more whose names I'd learn later. And Mr. Brennan, the teacher, lying on a lab table with his legs splinted in rulers and duct tape, his face gray with pain, conscious but barely. You said shelter, Adrian said. She was already leading. Already had been. I could tell by the way the others oriented toward her, the way the room exhaled when she spoke. How far? About a mile, underground. Sealed. I have food, water, air filtration. For 9 more people? I hesitated. She saw it. For how many? It was designed for 3. But there's... I stopped. Did the math in real time. Told the truth. If we ration hard, 4 months, maybe 5. That's not long. It's longer than 2 days of water on a 2nd floor with infected below you. She looked at me, assessed. I saw the calculation behind her eyes, the same calculation I'd been making for days. Not whether to trust, but whether the alternative was worse. Mr. Brennan can't walk, she said. His femur's broken. We splinted it, but he needs to be carried. Can we build a stretcher? We already have one. She gestured to the hallway. A classroom door removed from its hinges, with a blanket duct taped to its surface. We've been ready. We just didn't have anywhere to go. I looked at the 9 of them. Starving, dehydrated. Some of them in clothes they'd been wearing for over 2 weeks. But ready, packed, waiting for a direction. Okay, I said. We go now. Before full light. Stay silent. I know the road. I was 16 years old, standing in front of 8 teenagers and an injured man, speaking with authority I had no right to feel. But here's what I understood. Authority isn't given. It doesn't come from age or title or expertise. It comes from being the one person in the room who has information the others need. In that moment, I knew the way out. That was enough. The descent down the fire escape took 12 minutes. Mr. Brennan went last, lowered on the stretcher door by ropes made of knotted lab coat sleeves. Kwame and Oscar took the front, Adrienne and I took the back, and the others climbed down ahead of us to spot from below. The infected on the 1st floor didn't react. Their circuits continued, their low ambient sound, that moan, constant, almost subsonic, vibrated through the building structure, but didn't intensify. We made it to the ground without contact. The mile back felt like 10. 9 people moved differently than 1. They breathed louder. Their feet fined every loose stone, every dry leaf. The stretcher bumped against fences and scraped through alley gaps with sounds that made me clench my teeth until my jaw ached. And the streets were not empty anymore, not like my dawn approach. The light had changed things. Shapes moved at distances, figures in yards, on porches, standing in the middle of intersections with that terrible stillness that preceded their attention. I kept us to the alleys. My father's map was memorized now, every shortcut, every fence gap, every covered passage between houses. We moved in a column. I led. Adrian brought up the rear. The others filled in between, carrying Mr. Brennan with arms that shook from hunger and effort. 3 blocks from my house, we lost the silence. Dana, one of the twins, stepped on a car's bumper where it jutted into the alley. The car's alarm deactivated months ago. But the bumper was loose, and it fell with a metallic crash that echoed off brick walls like a gunshot. Everyone froze. The moan changed. That ambient frequency, it had been constant, directionless. Now it sharpened, focused. I could hear it converging from multiple directions like water finding a drain. "Move," I said. "Fast. Don't run, fast walk. Stay together." We moved. 3 blocks became an eternity. I could hear them now, not just the moan, but the footsteps. That dragging shuffle, multiple sources, getting closer. I didn't look back. Looking back meant slowing down, and slowing down meant Adrian's voice from the rear, tight and low. 2 behind us, coming from the cross street. They're moving faster than I thought they would. How fast? Walking pace, but they don't stop. Don't let them close to arm's length. Just keep moving. 1 block, our fence, the gate. I pulled it open and waved them through. 1, 2, 3, the stretcher sideways through the gap. 5, 6, 7, 8. Adrian last, with her fire extinguisher in a white-knuckle grip. Well, and behind her, visible now, 3 figures at the alley mouth. Not running, walking, heads tilted at identical angles, eyes that caught the light wrong. I closed the gate, latched it. It wouldn't hold. It wasn't meant to hold. We crossed the yard, through the back door, into the kitchen, down the basement stairs, and I was pulling the shelving unit aside and pounding on the steel door. 4 knocks. Pause. 2 more. 3 seconds. 5, 7. The bolts turned. 1, 2, 3. The door opened and Eli was there, eyes wide, looking past me at the stream of strangers filing down his staircase. "You did it," he whispered. "Close the door. Close it now." The last person through was Kwame, helping Oscar with the back end of the stretcher. I counted heads. 9, plus Eli, plus me. 11. My father appeared from behind the door, face slack with confusion, watching strangers fill his shelter like water filling a bowl. "Marcus?" His voice was wondering, not angry, not yet. "What did you do?" "I saved them." "What did you do?" "I saved them, Dad." He looked at the faces, the teenagers, the injured teacher, his daughter. No, these weren't his. They were strangers. They were consuming his math, his timeline, his careful architecture of survival. I watched the numbers cascade behind his eyes. 16 months becoming 4, 4 becoming less. Everybody a mouth, every mouth a subtraction. And then something happened that I didn't expect. He sat down on his cot, put his head in his hands. And when he looked up, his eyes were clear, clearer than they'd been in days. "Okay," he said. "Okay. We need more water drums. The filtration rate?" He was calculating, planning. The old engine engaged by a new problem. 11 people. 3 liters per day minimum. The drums give us... His hands had stopped shaking. His focus was singular, precise. Crisis recentered him. The challenge of new logistics burned through whatever fog had been accumulating. My father, faced with an impossible resource equation, became briefly the man I needed him to be. I watched it happen and felt something complicated move through me. Relief, yes, but also this, the understanding that my father's clarity was conditional, that it required emergency, that peace was what unraveled him, that the man who built this shelter had needed catastrophe to function, and that the catastrophe arriving was, in some broken way, the thing that brought him back. 3 days with 11 people in a shelter built for 3. The sound was the first thing. Breathing, multiplied. The shelter had been quiet, too quiet. The silence of 3 people in a sealed space learning to exist without stimulation. Now it was never quiet. Someone always shifted, whispered, coughed. The chemical toilet behind the curtain was in constant rotation. The air system, designed for 3 sets of lungs, labored audibly, its fan increasing pitch like a complaint. My father adapted. That surprised me. In those first days after the school group's arrival, he operated with a precision I hadn't seen since before his decline. He reorganized the supply shelves, tripling ration efficiency by combining partial cans, identifying caloric density priorities, establishing a rotation schedule that kept people fed without overlap. He recalculated the water system, found margin I hadn't known existed by reducing the flush volume on the chemical toilet and implementing a gray water recapture for the filtration intake. Adrian, we worked alongside him. She didn't ask permission, just started moving, organizing, filling gaps. The 2 of them operated in parallel. My father with systems knowledge, Adrian with people management. She assigned sleeping rotations when there weren't enough bunks. Mediated the first conflict, Oscar and Kwame arguing over space with a sentence so calm and final that both boys simply stopped. Mr. Brennan was the crisis. His leg was badly set. The splint had prevented further displacement, but the bone wasn't aligned. I could see it in the angle, the way the limb bent slightly wrong beneath the duct tape. He needed surgery. He needed antibiotics. He had neither. And on the 2nd day in the shelter, his fever started. Infection, my father said, examining the leg with surprising gentleness. Not the infection, regular, bacterial. The bone may have broken skin internally. What do we do? We have amoxicillin in the medical supply. Broad spectrum, and it might be enough. He paused. Might not. We gave Mr. Brennan the antibiotics. He swallowed them with water we couldn't spare and slept with the fever burning through him like a slow fire. The students took shifts sitting beside him, not doing anything useful, just being present. I understood that. Presence as medicine, witness as care. On the 3rd night, Adrienne found me at the radio desk during my monitoring shift. Your father, she said quietly. What's wrong with him? I didn't look up from the dial. What do you mean? I mean the talking, the way he disappears in the evening. The medication you're putting in his food, yes, I noticed. I was a pharmacy tech's kid before all this. She sat on the edge of the desk. I'm not judging. I'm asking because I need to know how reliable he is. I turned from the radio. Met her eyes. She was 15 a year younger than me, and she looked 40. Dark circles, chapped lips, a steadiness that belonged to someone who'd already processed their own fear and moved past it into function. He's bipolar, I said. Possibly schizoaffective. I'm not sure I found the medications, but I don't have a diagnosis. He built all of this during what I think was a manic phase. Years of construction, planning, stockpiling. My mom left because of it. Now he's cycling. Good in the mornings, bad at night. He tried to open the door on day 8 because he heard my mother outside. Adrienne absorbed this, without reaction. And you've been managing him? Yes. For how long? Since day 4, when he forgot Eli's name. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you're 16. I know. That's not okay. That's not a sustainable situation. You know that. I know. So, what's the plan? I almost laughed. The plan. As if I had one. As if anything beyond keep people alive until tomorrow constituted a plan. But she was looking at me with such practical expectation that I found myself answering honestly. The medication seems to help. The presence of more people seems to help. He has purpose now, logistics to manage. But long term, I don't know. He's the one who knows these systems best. If he fully decompensates, then you know the systems. You've been learning. Not everything, not enough. Then learn faster. She stood. I'll help manage him during his bad hours. I'm good with difficult people. My dad was difficult. A pause. Something unsaid behind it. Get some sleep. I'll take the radio. I should have protested. Instead, I climbed into my bunk and slept deeper than I had in weeks. Not because the danger was less, because the weight was shared. Day 23. Mr. Brennan's fever broke. It happened in the early morning, that thin hour between shifts when the shelter was at its quietest. Sophie, who'd been sitting beside him, let out a small gasp, and then his voice, weak but coherent. Water, please. We gave him water, then broth, then more water. His eyes cleared over the course of 2 hours, his skin cooling from furnace to merely warm. And by midday, he was propped against the wall, taking stock. How many days? He asked. 6 since we brought you down, I said. 23 total. He looked at the shelter, the 11 people, the systems, processed it with the measured expression of a man who taught high school biology for 20 years, someone accustomed to observing before reacting. The young man who came for us, he said. That was you. Yes, sir. I was conscious for some of it. The stretcher, the alley. He paused. You're not old enough to have done what you did. Nobody's old enough for any of this. He studied me, then nodded once and turned his attention to the shelter's systems with the quiet curiosity of someone who understood that understanding was survival. Within 2 days, he was asking questions about the water filtration, the air exchange, the caloric math. Not to take over to contribute. Another mind on the problem. My father tolerated him. More than tolerated. In his good hours, they talked. Logistics, hypotheticals. 2 adult men in a room full of teenagers, circling the same questions. How long can we stay? What's happening above? When does waiting become dying? It was Mr. Brennan who first said it plainly on day 25. We can't stay here indefinitely. The math doesn't work, and you all know it. 11 people in silence, the fan humming, the truth hanging there like smoke. 4 months at current ration levels, my father said. Less if anything fails. And after 4 months, we surface, scavenge, extend. Into what? We have no information about what's out there beyond 3-week-old radio signals. Then we get information. My father's voice had that morning clarity, sharp, committed. We send scouts, map the area, find resources. You're describing a permanent transition to surface operations, Mr. Brennan said. Not occasional scavenging, a permanent move upward. Eventually, yes. Then why wait 4 months? Why not start now, while we still have reserves to fall back on if scouting fails? My father didn't answer immediately. I watched his face and saw the war there, the builder's attachment to what he'd made, the engineer's inability to abandon a system he'd spent years perfecting. This shelter was his cathedral. Leaving it was not a tactical decision for him. It was an identity death. Because it's safe here, he said finally. It's safe and it's finite, Mr. Brennan replied. Those are the same thing. The room was quiet, everyone watching. I felt the moment's weight, the pivot point, the place where the story could go 2 directions. My father's shelter or the unknown surface, his architecture or the open world. I should have let them work it out. Two adults, two rational minds in dialogue. But I looked at Eli, my brother. 23 days thinner, 23 days paler. And I thought about 4 months of this fluorescent light. 4 months of canned food and recycled air and a ceiling 6 feet above your head. 4 months of watching my father's good hours shrink and his bad hours expand. Mr. Brennan's right, I said. My father looked at me. Not the unfocused evening gaze, the sharp morning look, the one that saw everything. We start scouting tomorrow, I said. We find out what's actually up there, and we make a real plan. The room shifted. I felt it. Not a mutiny, nothing so dramatic, just a center of gravity moving. From the man who built the shelter to the boy who'd opened the door, my father's jaw worked. His hands, those hands that had shaken on the first night, were still. He looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded. "Okay," he said. "Okay, Marcus." And I heard in his voice something I'd never heard from him before. Deference. Surrender. The sound of a man letting his son lead because he recognized in his one clear, lucid moment that he no longer could. I wasn't ready. I need you to know that. I was not ready to be what that moment made me. But the readiness didn't matter. The necessity did. We scouted in pairs. My rule, no one goes alone. Adrian and I took the first run. Early morning, my father's sharp window. Eli stationed at the door with a 4-2 signal drilled into his memory. The neighborhood had changed in the 5 days since I'd last seen it. The infected had moved through like weather, some houses breached, doors hanging open, dark stains on porches, others untouched. No pattern I could identify, randomness or a logic we couldn't read. We moved 4 blocks in a wide circle around our position. Adrian carried a bat aluminum from the school's equipment closet, one of 3 they'd escaped with. I had the hunting knife. We didn't need either. The streets that morning were empty. Whatever migration pattern had moved the horde through on day 11 hadn't returned. And the local population of infected seemed sparse, scattered. Individuals rather than groups, standing in houses or yards with that static patience. What we found? A convenience store, unlooted, its doors still locked. A pharmacy with its back window broken, but most of its stock intact antibiotics, painkillers, bandages, hydrogen peroxide. 2 houses with intact pantries full of canned goods. A hardware store with tools, rope, tarps, nails. Resources. Enough to extend our timeline significantly. Enough to plan beyond 4 months. We mapped it all, returned within 2 hours, reported to the group. And for the first time since I'd brought 9 people into a 3-person shelter, I saw something other than survival calculus in their faces. I saw possibility. Kwame and Oscar took the next run. Then Sophie and Dana. Each pair expanding the map, marking resources, noting infected positions. We built a picture of our territory, a 6-block radius of salvageable civilization surrounded by a wider ring of uncertainty. My father monitored the radio while we scouted. His contribution, his role. And he found something. A signal from the south. Faint, fragmented, but consistent. A community, organized. Broadcasting supply needs and offering coordinates. 40 miles south in a town called Ridgecrest. They're trading, he told me that evening. His eyes were starting to drift, the evening decline beginning, but he fought it, stayed present. Broadcasting what they have and what they need. Seeds, fuel, medical supplies. They're building something. Can we reach them? 40 miles. He blinked, focused. Not on foot, not safely. But if we found a vehicle, 1 step at a time, Dad. He nodded, drifted. I let him go. That night, I sat with Adrian at the radio desk, and we listened to the Ridgecrest signal together. Voices, multiple, organized. They'd established a perimeter, agriculture, water treatment, a medical station. They'd lost people, the broadcasts acknowledged that, named them even. But they were building, not just surviving. Building. That's where we go, Adrian said. Eventually. Eventually, I agreed. But not yet. Not yet. Not until everyone can travel. Not until we know the route. She looked at me in the blue-white light. You sound like a leader. I sound like my father. No. She shook her head. You sound like what he could have been. I didn't know what to do with that. So I turned back to the radio and let the voices from Ridgecrest fill the silence with evidence that the world, somewhere, was still trying. Day 31. The night my father tried to leave. Not open the door in confusion, leave. Deliberately. Packed. Boots on. The hunting knife in his belt and a water bottle in each hand. I found him at the top of the stairs at 3 a.m., standing before the sealed door with his hand on the first bolt. And this time, his eyes were clear. Clear in a way they hadn't been in days. The terrible clarity of decision. Dad. He didn't startle, didn't turn, just stood there with his hand on the bolt. Where are you going? Boise? Dad. She's alive. I know she is. His voice was level, conversational. Not the confused murmur of his episodes, something harder, resolved. I should have gone 3 weeks ago. I let you convince me she was beyond reach. She wasn't. She isn't. I climbed the stairs, stood behind him, didn't touch him. Mom is 90 miles away in a city that fell on day 3. You heard the broadcast. You wrote it in your notebook. Boise fallen. You wrote those words. Broadcasts are wrong. Information is incomplete. You've seen it. The world isn't as bad as the early reports said. Your scouting proved that. Empty streets, passable roads. I can move faster alone. You can't. I stopped. Breathed. Chose my words with the care of someone disarming a bomb. You're not stable enough to travel 90 miles alone. You know that. On some level, you know that. He turned then, looked at me, and his face was God. His face was my father's face, the real one, the one from before. Sharp and proud and frustrated and certain, the one that made my mother feel small and made me feel safe. It was all there, reassembled from fragments, and I understood that this was his last lucid gamble. His brain had gathered every remaining resource into this moment of coherence, burned through its reserves for one clear night, and he was using it to leave. Marcus. His voice was gentle. You don't need me here anymore. You haven't needed me for weeks. You run this shelter. You lead these people. You made the right call every time I would have made the wrong one. He put his hand on my shoulder. Let me go find your mother. I could have said yes. Part of me wanted to. The practical part, the part his illness had built in me through weeks of invisible caretaking, knew that his presence was a variable, that his decline required resources, emotional, chemical, temporal, that the group might function more smoothly without the daily management of his episodes. That in strict survival math, his departure was not a loss. But another part, the part that was still 16, still his son, still the boy who'd never seen those hands shake before the night this started. No. Marcus, no, Dad, you don't get to leave. My voice broke on the word. I heard it crack and I let it. You don't get to build this and fill it with people and then walk out because your brain tells you Mom is waiting. She might be dead. She probably is. And if you leave here, you will die on that road. And Eli will have no father. And I stopped. Couldn't finish. The sentence I'd been carrying for weeks pressed against my throat. And I will have to carry this without you. And I'm not ready. And you have no right to leave me with this. He watched my face. Watched the tears I couldn't stop. And the clarity in his eyes, that terrible borrowed lucidity, softened into something else. Something that might have been shame. Or might have been love. I couldn't tell the difference anymore. His hand dropped from the bolt. He sat on the top stair. I sat beside him. We stayed there until dawn leaked through the cracks around the door. Gray light, thin and persistent, the world continuing without permission. "I'm sorry," he said. The first time I'd ever heard those words from him. "I'm sorry you had to become this." "I'm not sorry," I said, and meant it, and didn't mean it, and would spend years trying to untangle which was true. We went back down together. He returned to his cot. By morning, his clarity was gone, replaced by the usual fog, the usual murmuring, the usual cycles. The moment on the stairs became something neither of us mentioned again. A sealed room within a sealed room, a conversation that existed outside time. But I remembered it. I remember it still. The last time my father was fully my father. The last time he was whole enough to choose. And what he chose was to stay. Not because I convinced him. Because he saw my face and couldn't leave it. Day 40. We left the shelter. Not forever, not in panic. As a group, by consensus, in daylight, with a plan. The Ridgecrest signal had grown stronger over 2 weeks, more detailed, more organized broadcasting route information now. Safe corridors, water points. Other groups had reached them. Survivors from towns to our north, our east. The road south was traveled. Dangerous, but known. We packed the shelter with the intention of return, if necessary a cash point, a fallback. My father helped organize the supply distribution with his morning clarity, dividing provisions into carry packs and reserve stores. 11 packs. 11 people moving as a unit. Mr. Brennan could walk now slowly, with a crutch fashioned from a broom handle and athletic tape, but independently. Sophie pushed a loaded hand cart. Kwame carried the radio. My father carried nothing heavy. I'd made sure of it. His pack was light personal items, water, the medication I no longer hid in his food because Adrian administered it openly now, twice daily, with a matter-of-factness that allowed him dignity. Eli walked beside me, 12 years old and 2 inches taller than when we'd gone underground. I'd measured him against the wall on day 35, a line in pencil beside the doorframe. Proof we'd been there. Proof we'd grown, even in the dark. The surface was different now, familiar from weeks of scouting. We moved through our 6-block territory like residents not hiding, not fleeing, but navigating. The infected were sparse. Those that remained were slower, less responsive. Something was changing in them, whether degradation or adaptation, I didn't know. But the world felt less like a war zone and more like ruins, a landscape to be traversed. We reached the highway by midday, south. The road stretched ahead of us, cracked asphalt and abandoned vehicles, and in the distance, faint, almost imagined smoke from chimneys. Ridgecrest, 40 miles. 3 days' walk at Mr. Brennan's pace. My father walked beside me for the first mile. His gaze moved across the landscape with an expression I couldn't read, something beyond lucid or foggy, something new. Witnessing, maybe. Seeing the world he'd spent years preparing for and finding it not quite what he'd imagined. "You know I built that shelter because I was afraid," he said. "I know. Not of this. Not specifically. Just afraid. All the time. Your mother knew. She could feel it in the walls." He paused. Walked. The sickness and the preparing. I don't know which came first anymore. Doesn't matter now. No, it doesn't. You're a better man than I was, Marcus. I'm not a man yet, Dad. He smiled. A real one. Creased and imperfect and full of something that looked like acceptance. Yes, you are. You have been for weeks. I'm sorry it happened this way. I took his arm, not guiding him, steadying, holding. The way you hold someone, not because they'll fall, but because you need them to know you're there. Keep walking, Dad. We've got a long way to go. He kept walking. We all did. 11 people on an open road, moving toward a signal, toward voices, toward whatever came next. Behind us, the shelter, sealed, waiting, a monument to fear that had, despite everything, kept us alive long enough to choose something else. Ahead of us, Ridgecrest. And beyond that, I didn't know. Nobody did. But the not knowing felt different now, less like a threat, more like a door. Sometimes I still hear his voice in my head when I make decisions. Not the murmuring, the other voice. The clear one. The one that planned and built and calculated without flinching. I use that voice. I'm not ashamed of that. He lived another 2 years after Ridgecrest. Good years, mostly medicated, stable, useful. He helped design their water treatment expansion, found purpose and systems again. When he died, it was quiet, a stroke in his sleep, his face peaceful in a way I'd never seen it in life. Eli is 19 now, taller than me, steadier than anyone has a right to be after what we lived through. He doesn't remember the shelter the way I do. For him, it was a dark chapter, finite and resolved. For me, it was the place I became whoever I am, forged in fluorescent light and recycled air, and the daily practice of holding someone together while they came apart. I'm 23. I run logistics for Ridgecrest's northern expansion. Adrian runs medical. Sometimes we catch each other's eye across a room, and something passes between us that nobody else would understand, the silent language of people who survived something together before they were old enough to name what surviving cost. My father built a shelter because he was afraid. I opened it because I was brave enough to be afraid and act anyway. That's the only difference between us. That's the whole story.